Welcome to Experiencing Consciousness. My name is Dyba.
And I'm Dr. Kathryn Rossi. We're happy you're here. So, I like hands.
Mm-hmm.
The beauty of hands is the representation on the brain of hands, especially the fingers. There's a huge amount of real estate in the brain associated with the hands. And most everybody talks with their hands. I know I do. And so when you think about the opportunities for the hands to be able to go to a different part of yourself that's not your linear mind, it's like pretty cool. So there's a really interesting one. And well, let's see if you like this, or if you say, Kathryn, try again. And another element about myself is I don't have time to have an ego. So, it's hard to offend me. It's hard to hurt my feelings. You don't need to take care of me, that sort of thing, or worry about that. If you were to do or say something that that hurt my feelings, I would say, surprisingly, that hurt my feelings. Like, I wouldn't just, go away and sulk, sort of thing. So it's my way to be able to say, you can be exactly who you are.
So in this segment, you started with sudden alteration of the topic, and you say, I like hands. And then you introduce the idea of hands as something that is important, as something that is mapped in the brain, that has a lot of space in the brain, and that has its own unique opportunities. And you develop that to some degree. And then you introduce another notion into the conversation, that you don't have an ego, and that Hubert, and the communication goes, you say to Hubert something like, you can say anything to me and not worry that I'm gonna be offended. So these are the two parts that I can see here. So is it introduction of the hands as a means of work, and then creating further safe climate or something like that, or is it something else? How do you, Dr. Rossi,
that's
understand
exactly it. That's exactly it. Is that that we were going to, I was going to introduce some hand techniques, and so that's why I was introducing with that, but also to continue to create a safe space. And in something that I'm very sensitive about is that I'm an American woman from California, which is different than being an American woman from Alabama, for instance, that there's a culture that I have, or an American woman from New York. The other thing is that I'm speaking with a Polish man. And so sometimes there can be miscommunications. And so I like to set the stage of any miscommunication is not a problem. So inevitably, I say something about being culturally sensitive, or if I'm with someone who has a strong religious orientation, for instance, so that's a different culture. I might introduce something along those lines, because the most important way you make change is when you can be exactly yourself, and you don't have, and many clients, they're in such a habit of people pleasing that they try to please their therapist too. And I don't want to be pleased. I want you to be exactly you. and essentially not give me a second thought. I want it to be all about you and not about me. And so it's again a different kind of orientation and a different respect that I bring in when I think that it can be valuable. And also I wanted him to kind of disengage from me and go into himself.
Yeah, and for me, I like it was interesting, and I remember very good this part with hands, because actually I was curious about it, because with Jacek during the sessions we were using hands quite a lot. For example, left hand being the things that are the distractions, and right hand being the creative one, and which one is going up, which one is going down. And the sessions also involved with some kind of touch also. So I was thinking before that how we will manage it, because the session is through the Zoom, through the internet for the first time, and I was quite curious about it. Will we use hands or we will not use hands? Because I knew that they are very often used as an inductive method in the hypnotherapy, and that was actually an answer for the question I didn't ask, but I was very curious about it before that, and I remember that part very, very well.
So we may also say that the comment that you said, that you did, the opening comment, I like hands, and then everything else also were built up on some previous associations that Hubert had. So,
and I was also starting to do some things with hands as a response. I don't know what exactly, but on the video scene, that when Kathryn says I like hands, I was also started to do this kind of stuff with hands spontaneously.
Exactly. So you actually responded. Have you? By the way, have you been at the moment you've been doing that? Were you aware, fully consciously aware that you were doing things with your hands, or was it, semi-automatic, for example?
I think it was more like a semi-automatic. I was not thinking to make things with hands. But when I saw this, I was also trying. I was also spontaneously trying to do some kind of stuff with hands.
So that would back up your previous claim, Dr. Rossi, that Hubert was already going into some kind of inner work before that process, because here we have the automatic response to a suggestion, which is also one of the indications of being in an altered state that trance is. Isn't that right?
Yes, and also it's me following, minimal cues. Hands, hands were moving. Let's see let's see how we can utilize this natural response.
So it's also a utilization here.
Yes. This is part of what following is about, is you have the opportunity to utilize.
Okay, so let's see what's gonna come next in this session.
So it's kind of interesting that if you tune into your hands and just looking at them, almost like you've never seen them before. And it's surprising how you've had these hands your entire life, but somehow today you can experience them in a different way that you never have before. And then kind of notice, like, is one hand more active than the other hand? Is one hand like warmer and the other hand cooler? Or are they exactly the same? It's like, not usually. And they begin to have a little dialogue with themselves. And the dialogue, it doesn't have to have words. Because when you go into your unconscious mind, the words are the last to come. but to simply being able to experience your hands in a brand new way that you never have before.
My first question, look at those hands like you've like as if you see them for the first time, or like you've never seen them before. I hear that statement a lot of times when I see you working with people. And I understand that this is a dissociative statement, but I always wanted to ask you that, how many levels does it actually have?
Well, what I want is to come into the present moment. And because when you're looking sensitively at your hands as if you've never seen them before, you're going to come into the present moment, and you're going to notice something typically about your hands that you never noticed before. And it automatically, when you go to a place like that, automatically that the hand, it feels like separate from the body even. And so in that respect, it is a dissociation. And your hand is on the end of your arm. You're really familiar that it's not detached, and yet it has the ability to have a mind of its own. So how many levels depends on the person. It depends on, it's like you might feel it in your whole hand, you might feel it just here, you might feel something different in every finger, that that there's this kind of freedom to explore the unconscious mind in a way that is unexpected. How many levels do you think it is, Jan?
I think a lot. I mean, first of all, the dissociation, by way of saying, look at those hands as if you've never seen them before, or as if you've seen them for the first time. Then on the other hand, that also facilitates curiosity and novelty. That would be the second and third level. But you also refer to those hands in such a way as if they had the mind of their own. So that would be further dissociation, and also facilitates automaticity to some degree.
And actually,
And
for
then
me,
also,
for me, one part was also interesting because it was referring to them like a dialogue without words that will come later, and it is exactly what is your problem when you are writing. You, on unconscious level, characters, and that they should talk about something like that, but the problem is that you need to put the exact words to their dialogue, and this is the process when you have a problem with writing. Exactly, this is what you struggle the most. That you want people to talk with each other, but you don't have words for that. So that was exactly precisely the problem when a person who have problems with writing can experience and can struggle with that. A dialogue without words. It have to be there, but you don't have words for it.
Was that a purposeful association, Dr. Rossi?
Oh, that Hubert is having right now. Each time it will be different. And that's part of the beauty of this. That's part of the beauty of being human, is you're not the same now as you were 2 seconds ago, that there's a constant evolution. And when you come from that point of view as a therapist, you have no idea what's going to be received. You have no idea of the outcome, because it's not up to you. That there is, as Ernie would call it, you offer heuristics, which is like an unconscious nudge to go wherever it is that you go. there's a richness with this. And one of the things that I'm wondering within the recording, the person who is speaking is the one that's on the screen. But in this instance, it actually would have been better that where my voice was there, but we were watching Hubert. So I'm just kind of curious about that, because when you see all of the changes that go on and the minimal cues that go on, it's like in this instance that we'll just see how that goes.
I'll try to figure a way to get the best recording in this session. I just just found the exact lines of the dialogue between the hands so that we can maybe look at it a bit closer. You say, and they begin to have a little dialogue. That's the first thing about the dialogue of the hands. And again, this is also a statement that, to me, the implication of that is that the hands have the mind and might be the life of their own, which is a dissociative statement with themselves. And the dialogue, it doesn't have to have words. Because when you go into your unconscious mind, the words are the last to come. But to simply being able to experience your hands in a brand new way that you've never had before. So is it also connecting the dialogue, experiencing with curiosity and novelty and surprise, things like that? That something new is going to come out of that?
Well, yes, and that where earlier I talked about leaving the critical voice behind. It's so like you're suspending judgment about what's happening. It's just plain happening. And I want to point out one other thing that is really subtle, is that when I started with the hands of I was doing this, I was going into a trance myself. And so I was going into that special place of joining within the trance, instead of me conducting, guiding in a linear way the experience. And I noticed that my eyes started to close. And I noticed that my speech began to slow, and that this is a beautiful thing. And so when one is in trance, generally the words are slower, the rate of speech is slower, and it gives time and space in between the words to experience that nonverbal level. And then to simply, trust and understand that if it's important, the words will come, but you don't have to have them now.
And if they will come, doesn't that imply that they are somewhere there to be discovered?
Or not? I mean, to me, that when a person is going through a therapy, and in talk therapy, it's really important you get to the end and you have some kind of linear and verbal understanding. But in some hypnotherapeutic work, the words don't come. And when that's true, it's because they're actually not important. If you're able to go to a place of resolution on the inside of yourself, that, it's not so important to have an explanation of that. The explanation, the words, that's like icing on the cake, but the cake is still good without icing. And so I like to give that freedom, that you don't always have to, figure it out in a linear way. So sometimes people will feel a shift, whether it's a physical shift or whether there will be, images, like, really strong, like amazing images, and that's enough. That so each person is individual in this regard. So this is part of the freedom of how I like to work, is that I have no expectation of the outcome, even if there will be words. It seems that eventually words come, but if the words don't come today, it's all right. And sometimes people just say, wow, that was just that experience. I don't know why, but it was transcendent. It's like, okay, you got the words. I had a transcendent experience. And also when people are explaining themselves after a trance, they're saying the most general things. And almost like they're still kind of in trance, but it's that it takes a little bit of time to put it all together in your linear mind. Mm-hmm. And what a wonderful thing that is, to have that freedom where you don't have to just do, but sometimes you just get to be, and to be whoever you are in that moment, without excuses, without explanations. So it's like a lot of these things, it just plain depends.
And I've got one more question to what you said a bit before. To what degree you are entering the trance while working with another person? I mean, since you are a therapist, do you decide on that? I mean, I'm gonna go half the way the person has to be. To have one foot in the office, one foot in this realm of the reality, or is it, you just let it happen and see what happens, kind of spontaneously, or do you have some kind of control over it? I mean, what are the criteria? What is there anything that helps you to judge or decide how far, how deep you want to go with that particular person into a trance?
I learned this from Ernie, that he said that he never wanted to take anybody in a trance if he wasn't willing to go there too. And so I really learned from Ernie, it's almost like having this permission to be able to join. And my criteria is that as long as I can pay attention to what's happening in the person that is with me, so the person or people. So if it's one person, or if it's a group, or if it's, a couple or a family or whatever, as long as I have this part of me that can really, still be alert to what's going on, so that I can respond to the minimal cues, that's really my criteria. And oftentimes when I'm deep into a trance myself, and my hands might just be like suspended, so and they're not moving, I'm not active within it, but there is that feeling of dissociation. I know that I'm in trance, and I know that but in the moment I suspend that mentally, to be able to give the responses to help the other person. Now, Ernie was very different in this regard. And Ernie would go into a trance. You're familiar with this, Jan, and his eyes would close. And he was talking, he was actually going through his own experience, but he was so connected to the client that the client was continuing with their own experience within it. And the client would sometimes open up their eyes and they're looking at Ernie, who's deep in this trance. And so they've actually come out of a trance. They see Ernie's really deep into it, and then they just go back into their own. And what Ernie said to me is, keep your eyes open. Don't do what I do. And I find sometimes that, you know, I close my eyes and just trust that. And so each person has to come to their own unique feedback. Each therapist needs to come to their own unique feedback in doing this. But unless you're in that kind of, I don't know, I'll call it a mental space, you know, it's like or a state of consciousness, you know, that if you're in a different state of consciousness than the client, then it's not as effective. You know, that so sometimes going into trance, particularly if you're dealing with something really difficult, that in some ways you need somebody to hold your hand, you know, like, you know, you don't need them to just be looking at you, you know, that you need them to be able to hold your hand. You need to be able to have that rapport. Holding hands sometimes literally, but you know what I'm saying. And that this is where experience really comes into play. And also that I didn't go into a trance where maybe I did a couple times where my eyes would close and I was deep into something within myself. But remember, we're not there for me. You know, that I'm like secondary in this process. And I'm also wise enough to know that when a trance is begun in me, it will continue, maybe even long after the person's left, that this process has begun. It will continue. It might go on in my dreams. It might go on, you know, in my early morning thoughts, or something spontaneous that comes up. So I have no need to make any kind of resolution for myself within while I'm working with someone else. Is this all making sense?
Mm-hmm. It's kind of complex.
It is, you know, it is. And this is where, wouldn't it be great if there was just a manual? You know,
Exactly.
so that you got the, okay, first you do this and second you do this. But when you're coming from that place where you're really in the present moment, and there's a certain level of honesty and respect within yourself about that you're growing too. And yet, you know what you're there for, that, you know, in walking that kind of line. But, you know, essentially, you can share a word or two or a sentence or two about what you might be experiencing, but that's in aid to the client to take them deeper, or, you know, give more possibilities, this sort of thing. It's a very complex thing. And I'm very grateful that I had so many years of watching Ernie. And as a result of watching him, of being able to really trust that process.
Yeah.
So that was very interesting for me, because I was always curious if you are going into a trance to some degree, but I have always forgotten to ask you. So this answer was very interesting for me also.
There's a lot of levels of kindness, and I think that, you know, that as Ernie had said, you know, he wouldn't ask anybody to go into trance if he wasn't going to do it himself. And I think that it's really kind. And, you know, I mean, those people that are going to be, you know, watching this video or hearing this, you know, it is a really deep subject. It's something that It's not necessarily automatic, you kind of gingerly go in, try, and but there has to be this really, deep comfort within yourself, and some kind of feedback loop, so that you're there for the client.
Yeah, I'm nodding my head, but it's not automatic. I mean, So everything kind of is focused strategically on a client. Whatever you say, you say it to facilitate something or direct something someplace.
Well, but it also could be that in what I'm experiencing on the inside of myself, that it may be that whatever the story is or the metaphor that comes out of me, it's going to be simpatico with the client, because we are now like entrained in the same ultradian. And so we're in stage 2 together, for instance, we're in stage 3. And so I don't think of it so much as a strategy. That I know that strategic psychotherapy is a super popular idea right now, and it's a really, cool idea, and I really like it. But I think there's times when it's just this natural exchange that goes on. And so I'm not, the only thing I'm aware of is what stage in the creative cycle we're in.
Okay.
And that's how I respond in what stage of the creative cycle. And so if we're in stage 1, the inquiry, you're asking the questions, and the questions are open-ended. If the direction is already moving forward, well, then you're in stage 2.
Yeah.
And stage 2 is when you need courage. The courage to stick with it.
Is this conversation already in stage 2 of the process? The conversation that we are analyzing, not the conversation that happens
that we're having
between us
right now. The conversation we're having right now is definitely stage 2. With I think we're still in stage 1. I think we're in stage 1.
Mm-hmm.
And it's weird, because you can be going like stage 1, delve into stage 2, go back to stage 1, delve into stage 2, and then all of a sudden the stage 2 clicks in, and boom, there you go. So that's why I couldn't immediately respond, is that, again, that's not linear. That there's the wave nature of consciousness, and there's also the wave nature of going through from one stage to the next. Sometimes it goes just stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, but particularly between stage 2 and stage 3, there's frequently a lot of vacillations.
Okay, so thank you.
Okay, one more thing that will be a footnote, and maybe not, maybe a bit stupid, but I will have to tell, because this diagnosis about ADD, and I think that must be something about it, and about the distractions, because, for example, for me, when I switch to English and I listen to English, sometimes I get this distraction when there are parts of familiar, like, lyrics appear, and for example, as soon as I hear the words, if they come and if they don't go, and Yashik was later asking you questions, and my mind was telling me, like, who was singing that song, words don't come easy to me, and I was struggling, like, to open a new tab, Google that, and I was struggling. I was telling to myself, no, you will not open right now the tab and Google who was singing words don't come easy. You will wait until the end of the session, and then you will check all this stuff. focus and stuff like that. And this is somehow the distractions work with me. Like I hear a lyric and then I will think, who was singing that single or something like that, and I really have to. But right now I decided not to open a new tab, not to Google it, wait, and then I will know.
So proud of you. Well done.
Yeah.
And obviously now you did that to me. I'm like, now I've got this song in my head and I'm thinking like, who the heck was that? This was another episode of our Experiencing Consciousness podcast. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Jan. You're the best. Be well, be happy, celebrate life.